Welcome back to Season 2 of The Core, where we're planting the seeds to financial success. I'm your host, Colten Hibbs, as well as ECU's Financial Health Coordinator, and today I'm joined by Ms. Baria from Palo Duro High School. Ms. Baria has just completed her 19th year at Palo Duro High School. She currently teaches economics and psychology, but she has taught social studies at all levels, from freshman to college credit courses. She was paired with us via Texas Workforce Solutions as part of a teacher externship program. We are very grateful to have her. I can't tell you enough how much fun it has been with you joining us this week. So let's just dive right on in. Today we'll be discussing basically back to school expenses. It's that time. So as a teacher with 19 years of back to school,
I've been through a few back to school experiences over 19 years. I've seen it all. Yes.
So you've seen the impact firsthand on yourself, on your coworkers.
Absolutely.
Can you describe some of the challenges that teachers and everybody sort of faces at those different levels?
Right. Well, I remember starting as a first-year teacher, walking into an empty room. You know, you've got your desks, you've got your whiteboard. You do have a few supplies maybe left over from your previous teacher, but it's not your own. And it can feel very overwhelming trying to make that classroom your own, and it can be very expensive trying to make that classroom your own. And I feel like I started 19 years ago when TikTok didn't exist. There was no, influencers showing these amazing rooms, and the pressure, I think that especially probably younger teachers entering into the classroom have to feel. I'm like, please turn that off. Do not go down the TikTok rabbit hole, because it will make you feel like you are so...
You're setting yourself up for
yes, you're never you don't even get paid until October. You don't have the money. Calm down. Yes. So I think that's a huge just pressure that new teachers have entering into the classroom. Families, I think depending on how many kids you have, how old they are, it can be, the older they get, they care more about the name brands. They want the $200 Jordans. Yeah. That can get so expensive for families. I think there's just a ton of challenges if your child is playing a sport. If they have to, have the cleats, and then, that's the fall sport, and then they're transitioned into the winter sport, and all of that can add up.
And not just the supplies, but the time. Who can now take the hours off work to practice?
Right. Well, I just drove by Amarillo High coming over here, and they had their early fall football practice, and I'm like, well, someone had to get you there. Yes, and, exactly. It is a huge commitment for families that it is, it's a huge challenge.
And so there are beneficial places, though, where those things sort of help, those back-to-school drives where they get backpack giveaways.
Yes.
And employers who help sponsor those things for their employees. Those are really huge benefits in the community. But when it comes to just those basic challenges, it's hard for many people to really grasp all of the moving parts that go into
Right. It can feel very overwhelming.
Yes. Now, the National Retail Federation estimates families with children in elementary through high school now spend on average $890 per household. How can families prioritize their spending to make the most of their back-to-school budget?
I was honestly surprised by that statistic. $890 felt high for me, and maybe coming from Palo Duro and maybe a lower socioeconomic group of kids, I just don't feel like my families are spending that level. And I looked at the AISD website for the school supplies, and there was maybe $50 worth of actual school supplies, essentials that you need. And so I have to think a lot of that's coming from back to school shopping, clothes, shoes, haircuts, all of that can add up so quickly. But I just feel like if you know it's coming in August, it's something you need to be planning for all year. It's not a surprise. It's like Christmas.
Yes.
You know that that's going to be a really expensive month, and you can't be expected to have $890 just magically ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so it's something that you need to maybe have a separate saving account for, putting money in, and just know that that's going to be a really expensive month, and planning for that.
Well, and another strategy that I sort of have encouraged people to try, and have tried myself, is leaning into those recyclable items. Like making sure, getting a binder that we can use next year. Getting those
Sure.
things that we can sort of last and
Right, like backpacks, if you haven't been a total monster all year, hopefully you could use that again.
Either you use it again, or if you have younger siblings, this is their next one, but you get the new one.
Right, or do some kind of trade with cousins or swaps.
Yes, those so those little saving strategies. And again, taking advantage, like we have the braids and fades events, for the back to school haircuts. Again, usually there are backpack giveaways that coincide.
Yeah, Amarillo is very generous, and I feel like Amarillo wants to pay it forward and give back. But you also have to have a level of preparation, and you can't just be like, school starts tomorrow, what do we need? Like, you have to be planning for that and finding those events, because you really can get so many of your needs met that way.
Yes.
And the organizations are so happy to participate and give back, and don't feel like you're taking from another family.
No, not at all. This is community.
Exactly.
This is what makes the Panhandles kind of special.
Yes.
And so I really do love that. Now, in a study on Statista, I believe is what it was, researchers found that most of that money, that $890, thankfully not on crop tops, but mostly on electronics and things like that. Now, in your experience, what do you find families are spending their back to school money on? Like, really? And not necessarily families, but teachers specifically.
Right.
Like, decorating their room, but what are those extra things?
Well, I'm not really sure like electronics, because AISD is so great about providing Chromebooks, providing laptops. I've have multiple, over 19 years, I've gotten upgrades, and I haven't felt the need to have to spend my own money on, electronics. So, but I do feel, the clothes are big, the shoes are so expensive, the, varsity sports, all of that is probably where that money is going. I don't feel like students are just coming in with, at the high school level, a backpack full of like options. They have like, I've got a notebook, which is fine. Yes. Like, check with your teachers. What do those individual teachers really need from you? We don't always need a ton of supplies. But yeah, I would think that probably that $890 is mostly the clothes and shoes.
Yes, clothes, shoes, earbuds, things like that.
Yes.
Now, what about those back to school, like we talked about like braids and fades and community events, but other community like resources that people can go to?
Right.
Our financial counseling program, I try to connect our counselors with those resources, so that way, at least for people that we're working with, we can say, here, go try Panhandle Community Services. Or go try this place. Are there places that you know of that could benefit?
Right. Well, I think every year is probably slightly different, but there's like the Backpack for Kids, which is huge. They gave 1,000 backpacks last year, full of school supplies. Yes. And you're just like, they had barbers, so you could get the haircut while you were there. Just so many amazing resources. And really, I think, you mentioned braids and fades, which is so fun. The Amarillo Public Health Department does low-cost immunizations. And the Barrio Back to School Bash. And then also thinking like, if that's an expensive month, there are other programs like food banks.
Yes.
And maybe you need to dip more into the food bank that month so you can pay for some of those back to school expenses. And so you can still be within your budget using other resources.
Offsetting your
exactly.
Normal costs
and just finding ways to save money here so you can put money somewhere else.
Fantastic. And if you need help doing so.
Yes. And honestly, ask.
There are free resources.
There are so many resources out there that if you, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And if you don't, like let that sink in. A closed mouth doesn't get fed. But, like if you don't ask, you might be missing out on something that would be so beneficial to you and your family.
Absolutely. Now, how can parents involve their children in the budgeting and shopping process for back to school? The general involvement is like, what do you want? Or what do you need for class? But how can they sort of healthily, I guess, or more organically or holistically, I don't know, whichever advocate you prefer, how can they involve their children more in that back to school shopping process?
Well, I do think it is such a big challenge. And I shouldn't be, as the parent, like your sole responsibility to magically show up with everything this kid needs. And the kids should be a part of that conversation and how hard you're working to provide that. But if you're like, I am willing to spend this much on a new pair of shoes, but your kid wants the new Jordans, well, maybe okay, well, how are we going to fill in that difference?
Yes.
And what is that going to look like? And maybe you need to get a job over the summer. Maybe you need to
mow lawns,
yeah. I mean, depending
dogs.
on how old you are,
Mhm.
there's lots of opportunities for you to earn money or earning money around the house for
Yes.
different chores. I think taking your kids with you when you go back to school shopping and your supplies don't just magically appear, like no effort, no time, no, like you're fighting for your life at Walmart. Well, your kids need to be a part of that.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
and helping you get their school supplies organized and set. And
you could, and this is the financial educator in me, but making it like, and I understand the stress and the craziness of Walmart and back to school time. So
yes,
this is asking the sun, moon, and stars in this perfect idealized world. But I mean, at the very least, saying, here's our budget, here's what we're spending today on our back to school. So as we pick out items, let's put it in the calculator. And
yes.
So let's just
let's see how much this is cost.
Like I know all this crazy stuff is going on around us, but let's at least track what we're spending before we get there.
Right.
And so just adding that.
You just having that conversation and just seeing like this stuff takes time, effort, energy to make happen.
Yes.
And just make your kid aware of all of the hard work that goes into that, because sometimes I feel like students can miss that component.
Yes, and how hard their parents do
Absolutely.
really work just to give them
the basics.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How can teachers in schools, speaking of like the work the parents are doing, but how can teachers in schools collaborate with families to sort of address those financial barriers? And there are significant financial barriers in AIC and CIC and all across Texas. But so how can, I know schools do so much, and there are so many opportunities available, but sort of this is that opportunity to like, what is available to help these people? Well,
I know at our school in AISD, like we don't want money to be the reason a student isn't taking a class or pursuing some type of education. And we work very hard to remove those barriers. I know at my school, like if you want to take an AP class and that test is a couple $100, the school pays for a good portion of that test. Or you want to take dual credit classes with Amarillo College, they'll pay a large portion of your tuition. They'll pay for your textbook. Like we don't want money to be the reason you do not take that class.
Exactly.
But yeah, and also if you are struggling, like go talk to those counselors. They have resources. I was just talking to a counselor at an elementary school. They helped a family fumigate their home for bed bugs. How would you, like, that's an amazing thing that the school was able to provide for this family. But if you didn't go tell the school of your need, they wouldn't be able to have organized that for you and help you with that. And so I think communicating with the school, letting them know your struggle, letting them know where you're at, and so the school can kind of meet you there or help you make a plan for how you can navigate that, and maybe the school can't help you with this, but they can help you with something else. And then you can use those resources for the other problem you have.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, if collaboration is communication and just being open and sharing where you're at.
Fantastic. I think people forget that schools are community resources, that we are building our future community in our schools. And so we're there. Schools are there to help.
Very much.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So what advice do you have for families or teachers who may feel overwhelmed by those back to school activities?
Right. Well, yeah. And it absolutely can be overwhelming, but I think planning ahead, starting early, maybe planning all year for it, because, and I'm one that like when I shop all year for Christmas, because I cannot, as a teacher, I cannot just show up in November, December thinking I can buy what I need for everyone. So I shop all year, I put it in a bin. And then it's so much less stressful. And I think the same thing could be true for back to school shopping. You find a sale, you find a good deal, you buy it in the next size, you put it in a bin knowing, well, I'm that much closer for those kids to go back to school. And just being mindful of it and preparing all year, I think is huge for families. Advocating for yourself, communicating with your school, with what you're going through is going to help with feeling overwhelmed about certain things, finding all those community programs. As teachers, don't compare your room to other rooms, right? What does it say? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Don't compare your room to TikTok. Don't compare your room to your neighbors. Like, you can create a warm, welcoming, safe environment without spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And you have your whole career to build your room.
Mhm.
And so maybe buy one thing, like one significant thing a semester or a year that you want. And when you're in it 10, 15 years, as we hope you will be, you will have a beautiful space. But you don't have to have it August 1st.
Yeah.
And that's
Tomorrow,
okay.
right
Yes,
now.
right. Like, the kids are much more interested in the relationship. Like, I've been adding things to my room for years, and I think half the kids don't even notice it. Honestly, like, and so sometimes I think we put this pressure on ourselves that no one else is putting on you, and just be aware of that.
I love that. What I want to say too, that, oh goodness, that was just so brilliant. It left me. Oh goodness. But yeah, when it comes to being overwhelmed by back to school expenses, not only being aware of the resources that are available to you, but recognizing too that back to school shopping and tax-free weekend, those might not also be the best times to go shopping, just because when things are on sale, people tend to save the money that they save on the sale. They tend to re-spend that money on more stuff. And so if you are that person who, I'm not just going to buy what I need, but I'm going to take advantage of the sale, it might be better to shop throughout the year or throughout the summer rather than waiting and then saving those last big ticket items for like a significant sale or tax-free time.
Right. Well, and I think too, as an economics teacher, we come back to needs versus wants, and having those conversations with your kids, and
Starts in kindergarten.
It does. They can understand the difference.
Yes,
they know the
that's what
difference, and I just think it does build character, and it is good for you to not have every need just constantly or every want just constantly given to you.
Correct.
And it's okay that you don't have the best of the best, or the thing if you haven't put the work in, like, that requires something special. That requires something extra.
Yes.
And you don't just get it because that's something you want. And having those conversations are just really building character. Absolutely. And really talking about life, because that's a skill that you're going to have to apply your whole life. It never goes away.
It's so much harder for you if you don't have that skill.
Right.
If you want what you want, but you're not willing to put the work in for what you want, you're going to be a very unpleased person. Right.
And just like that delayed gratification means so much more than that instant, satisfaction.
Like the woohoo moment.
Right. Like that, being able to work for something and being able to delay that gratification for the bigger reward in the future is just a life skill that will benefit them when it comes to grades, when it comes to choosing, like, am I going to go hang out with my friends, or am I going to do the hard thing?
Am I going to study?
Right. It just will go into so many other aspects of their lives. And it's truly a skill that you can start with back to school shopping.
Yeah, it has to start somewhere.
It does, absolutely.
Miss Baria, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's been wonderful. You are so much fun.
You've been so insightful.
I could not do this podcast, and I would not want to do the podcast with anyone else.
Oh, you were fantastic. We appreciate you and our wonderful audience. Don't forget, you can catch the latest release every other Wednesday on Spotify or YouTube. And with that, we'll see you next time on The Core.